to another edition of Maximum Growth Live. I'm one of your hosts, Jay Ruane, CEO of Firm Flex, your social media marketing funnels for lawyers, as well as managing partner of Ruane Attorneys, a civil rights and criminal defense firm here in Connecticut. I'm also the founder of the Criminal Law Mastermind. We'll talk a little bit about that at some point, I'm sure. But with me, as always, is my man Seth. Seth, as you can see, is in the borough, the base. Is that the basement of Price Benowitz? You know, we talked about on past shows Seth's basement and how a lot of people aspire to it. He had all these people working on websites and intakes. But Seth is the managing partner of Price Benowitz, DC, Maryland, Virginia, and South Carolina law firm that handles personal injury, family law, criminal defense, and I'm sure something else. Key Tam. I mean, you got something going with a little bit of everything, and of course, he is the major domo over there at Blue Shark, the man who's one of the two founders of Blue Shark Digital. So, Seth, it's been a while since we did one of these shows. You had a break, then I had a break, but it's good to be back. How's your week going?
It's going well. We had a good break. It was good to be in Florida, and as you were, we had Peter Shankman come over to Blue Shark for our first in person since he joined up, and he's all in. It was just great. Both privately getting to hang out with him, and then his sort of brainstorming with the group as a whole. Just the way his mind works, and a day, he talks about getting PR and doing it, and he threw me some bones, and it was a good feeling to be back. There was more press to be had on the Twitter acquisition story, where there's really no wrong answer. You give your opinion, and it was just interesting working with the press. Seeing what he had done with Haro was essentially like he got annoyed with too many people calling him, just like you and I get called a lot saying, hey, who should you refer to? He basically took his personal Rolodex and turned it into a monetizable and then eventually sellable event. And ironically, he told a story that that PR Newswire had come by and wanted to, said, hey, you're doing what we're doing. You're not allowed to do that. It's like, why not? And so he says, buy me. And it was, for, I don't know, $60,000, $100,000 or something, he would have just given it to them. And they didn't return his email or call. And he was acquired for, several multi-million-dollar deal. And then the company that acquired him got acquired by PR Newswire for even more money. So essentially, they ended up paying probably 8 figures for what they could have been given early on.
Wow, that's amazing. It's interesting. I got to spend some time with him at dinner at Fisher's Mastermind in New York at the beginning of the month. And he's got some really interesting perspective that I think maybe a lot of lawyers miss out on. And that is when you're communicating with the media, you sort of have to make it what's in it for them. A lot of lawyers and law firms are used to just issuing press releases, issuing the ego-based press release. Here's what we're doing. You should cover us. But he had a really good point where he said, no. Reach out to the directors, reach out to the producers and say, here's what's hot. And I can talk about these things and solve your pain points. And talk about it, a totally different way of approaching getting press.
I couldn't agree more. And I saw it myself. He said, hey, I don't know why he didn't want it. He said, hey, WPIX, it was my childhood TV station, one of the Yankees, and the video game Pix, where you'd have to, you basically, they were playing a video game. You'd be on your phone if you were lucky enough to get in as a caller, and to move your Pong thing, you had to yell Pix. Anyway, I digress, but it was a producer. He was sitting at home, not feeling great in his sweats, and all he wanted to do was get through the day. And if I could give him the sound bites he wanted, it was gold to him. He was so appreciative. And the idea is solving people's problems, whether you're doing SEO, whether you're doing social, or whether you're a lawyer. If you solve somebody's problem, they're going to pay you for it. And in this case, they pay us with airtime and links.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's really something that, it's sort of a paradigm shift. Lawyers, I've been talking about it for years. On social media, stop making it about you, making it about how you can help people. And that's really going to be the difference maker in building your brand and getting you out there. So I think, it's nice to hear a person sort of elucidate that a lot more eloquently than I can and put it out there. And Shankman does a great job with that. And obviously it's working. So follow that lead. Make it about what problems you can solve for people. And really that dovetails nicely into, a law practice, because our job is to make problems go away. And it's interesting to me, over the last couple of weeks, having been away, I have found that I have come to rely on the speed of something like Amazon Prime so dramatically that I think it's sort of imbued myself, and I know my family, and probably yours too, and many of our listeners, that we sort of expect instant responses. And it's amazing to me how many times I've gotten feedback from my intake team saying, somebody calls in at 9 o'clock, they have a question, and we say, hey, we're going to do some research about your issue, and we'll call you back and we'll tell you if we can help, how we can help, that type of thing. And at 11, the person's calling in saying, okay, you got a response? And then at 12, and we're like, yeah, we had to call our contact at the DMV. We're waiting for them to call us back. It takes some time, or call somebody at a courthouse. It takes some time. And patience is gone. People want instant. And I think that's going to be something that good law firms are going to be paying attention to in the next, decade or so, is how can you move quicker and faster?
Well, and I'll pivot to one of the topics we want to talk about today, which is the internal pain of hiring. So for people that I have an internal recruiter. It's something I'm a big believer in scale. In fact, I've gotten so in on this that I have a recruiter, and they have deputies overseas doing different pieces of the recruiting, whether it be sourcing, one person for international, one person for domestic. To me, I'm all in, because it's all, again, all about talent. But one of the things that kept coming up was when you're looking for a difficult hire, let's say my personal injury practice, there was a disconnect between the recruiter and the hiring partner for that division. And again, it could take it down to yourself, because sometimes you have both those roles. But this person kept complaining, hey, the resumes I'm getting, not sure they're exactly what I want. Now, part of it is just frustration that when you're looking for a diamond in the rough, it doesn't always come. But what struck me, and Jay, king of all systems, hopefully you can help us figure out how to create the system for this, is when hiring, it's one thing to say, here are my rote questions and here's my job description, because that's what every recruiter outside, third-party recruiter wants that. But what are the 6 questions that are most important for this job, and putting those front and center? I know you do a lot yourself you hold several of those spots on a theoretical org chart, but for me, I was finding a disconnect, so that lawyers were getting upset they weren't getting the talent they thought they should. And that what I'm forcing people to do, and hopefully we can create a system for this, is what are your 6, and we actually want to create some sort of Google form. You want to make a hire, you need to fill this out, and those questions will then be front and center. So you'll know, have you first chaired a trial? If so, how many? How many depositions have you done? How many years of experience? Where are you barred? For us, these are the essential questions, which very often get lost. I was looking within my own hiring, and I could tell whether they had good transportation, and I could tell whether or not they were looking to work remotely or not, but I wasn't telling for the more sophisticated hires those more detailed questions.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we see out there. A lot of consultants say, when you're hiring, this was back before the employee market was a little better for the employees and better for the employers, but they would say, okay, make them FedEx in or use DHL to send in their application, and make them jump through a million hoops. But I think that misses the mark, in that that sort of attention isn't necessarily what's needed. What you need to do is actually pull from the people who are actually going to put those people to work, and find out exactly what it is.
I think that was the final piece, which is there's the theoretical, but it was getting those questions. Like when you get to the interview, in theory, like those are the questions that I'm asking. That should be the first and foremost, where you're starting with that. And that you're diving into, is this the right fit for a bunch of reasons, or knowing flat out, oh, this person's waving into Connecticut or waving into DC, and that they're not there at this second. Can I live with that? But then I know that, and I'm not trying to they do a dragnet, the facts, just the facts. Get the facts out of the way so you can have the personality driven and culture vision part of the conversation first and foremost, and not focus as much on the other pieces. You may want to dive into them. It says you've only done 7 depositions. What gives? And it's like, well, those were, cases that, anyway, where the deposition went on for 3 months. I'm making this up, but it's the idea is, yes, there's reasons to break the rules, but I feel like I have not systematized that process, and that's, thanks to Jay.
Well, here's a perfect example. I've tried 37 cases. Now, I have colleagues across the country in Texas and in Arkansas who've tried 500 cases, DUI cases. But in my state, 37 DUI cases, I think the next closest person to me has tried 4 or 5. So if I come to an interview and they're like, "Oh, you've only tried 37 cases," I'm like, "Yeah, but compared to my compatriots here, I'm 7x what they have done." So you need that sort of context in the interview, and I think that's one of the things that if you are working on a system for hiring, you should start to identify that early on.
So I'll challenge you, because you like to create these things. If there is some sort of a form that would allow people to put their requirements, which again, I look at the requirements and I say it with a snark, because I look at it like dating. You want an attractive, back to my singleness, I want an attractive woman who is this tall and would, played sports and like to travel, all these things. And the point is, okay, great, but that's not it. But what are those questions? If religion's important to you, let's find that out up front before you ever go, if, do they live near you? Because if they don't, that's, then they're geographically undesirable, so you don't want to start a long-term relationship. What are those? And putting something that would force the person requiring the hire to go through that exercise. So I challenge that for the J Systems project.
Okay, I can get that done. I've got my assistant working on pulling out all of our hiring systems right now, because I'm going to release them in the systems group over the next 3 months. So I can easily put that in. And in fact, it's something that we are actively starting to look for a new lawyer to start a new section for us. And one of the things that I'm going to do is actually interview the 2 managers in that department and say, okay, what are you looking for? Let's not just put out, because like you and I'm sure you're constantly having job postings up just to see, new people come into the area and that type of thing. And I'm always recruiting. I've got job postings on Indeed in 5 geographic areas that just stay up there every month, and it's expensive, but it's part.
I know we go on other things, but let me ask you a question about this, because I do that, right? I want to be able to, for intake, I'm always hiring, right? There's certain things, and I leave up more stuff because I have fishing lines out. If I could find this person, I'd hire them, but they never come around. I'm looking for some senior family law with a book of business, or, hey, if somebody wants to bring, there are a bunch of things that I'm always looking for, but there's also, do you think that there are people that do nothing but look at job boards? And if you have too many up, do you think it's possible somebody say, hey, you have a lot of turnover because you're always hiring? I'm sort of torn, because I don't want that reputation. I don't think we have it. At the same time, I want to be able to look for all these different things. And God forbid somebody if any of those 9 or 10 people that I have up there, let's say 3 are fires that we need to hire for, but everything else is wishes or wants, which would make me money if I could find it. But I don't want to have a perception as I like to think
So what we do to counter that, just you may want to include some of this, is we actually take an average of our tenure and talk about that in the job posting. And so we'll say an average person, an average lawyer in this department is with us for 7.5 years, that type of thing, and the division is growing. And so that frames the job posting of, oh, they just need more people. It's not a dumpster fire of a practice group. And so that's the way we frame it. And we go so far as in our job posting say, okay, here are our core values, make sure they align with you. And then we have a whole section. This job will be for you if you want to do these things. This job is not for you if you don't like doing these things. Because we want the job postings to speak to people and say, yeah, that's the kind of place for me. I mean, for us, we're criminal defense, civil rights, and for us, it's not people don't come to these practice areas for the money. It's definitely not something. But I want to talk about the money a little bit because a lot of people have messaged me, and I've messaged you, and I'm sure you've gotten some stuff. There are some things going on in the Google world, and there are some ads being run for other speakers and that type of thing about changes that are coming to pay-per-click, to LSAs, to maps, to all that stuff. So I challenged you in a text message 2 days ago to come up with some answers for me. So overall, broad, can you tell me what are anticipated changes in the LSA and pay-per-click world so people can sort of understand that the sky is not falling?
Well, look, two things. Let's separate clickbait versus reality, right? Because there are people selling stuff, whether it be courses or their services, and like, oh my God, the sky is falling. A couple things. Look, the biggest issue was LSAs and the fact they went from easy money to hard to get, hard to get your spend up. The fact that you really have to be careful, particularly outside of PI, as to whether or not you're getting ROI, because in the fee for service area, those people that have a higher dollar offering in the LSAs, very often it's tough because smarter money is researching, whereas the guy pushing at the top is looking for the $1,000 will. And so in that place in particular, if you have a lower dollar widget, it works really, really well. Higher dollar widgets, you really should be testing. But the big, I believe one of the things that was out there, which really doesn't seem that significant to me, was for a number of years, Google was intermittently showing ads as part of the 3-pack. There's a 3-pack, right, and then there might be an ad or two above it. Those ads, which came with a lot of
the 3-pack is what the map, the
map pack
on the map,
right? And that before the map pack, you would see an additional ad, sometimes two, usually one, slotted in up there, right? And that was something that when it first started was extremely clunky. You could actually bid on it itself. It was a separate bidding system.
I remember doing that.
And it was like it was frustrating, impossible. It was a goal, it was awesome, but you could barely get it. Then for last several years, it hasn't been something you bid on independently. It's something they gave you as an ad if you were spending money. And instead of just being at the top, they would like layer an ad down into the 3-pack. Yes.
And I found that I showed in that 3-pack when I had my location extensions active in my pay-per-click.
Anything you did, yeah. That was one, there were many different things. I saw that with people with great spend. If they're trying to get your spend up, they put you there. Location extend, all that stuff. Yes, yes, and yes. But it was something that you couldn't control particularly well. Right. You couldn't say, I want my ad there and only there. It would get there and it would, like, you get what you get and you don't get upset. I believe one of the clickbait stories that's going around is it appears that the buying of Google ads, is disappearing, and that the GM, that the local service ads are going to get a spot or two there. That's what we're seeing. We've seen, so it's not in many search results. We've seen it in some. I believe that's what some of the clickbait is talking about. Is it interesting? Yeah, it's interesting. If you're not doing LSAs or pay-per-click, it's not going to affect you at all. Meaning, right, it's like the death tax. My old professor at Penn, Frank Luntz, created the death tax. Half of middle America voted against Democrats on the death tax. Not, whether they realized it or not, it was a $20 million threshold, at least today's, that if you're under that, it doesn't affect you. But people were literally choosing their candidate based on the fact that the death tax was a thing when it was an inheritance tax, which frankly, do you want, Elon Musk's kids to get all of his money without any money transferring? Anyway, I digress. So, is it something that's significant? Yeah, if you're doing pay-per-click, it is a change, but is it a monumental change? It's basically potentially more inventory, and LSAs are one that we're, for our PI clients and for price balance and for all the Blue Shark digital clients, where all we're doing is fighting for more inventory. I think Google's saying we don't have enough inventory to sell. Where can we throw some more up? It's okay. Stuff at the top did fine, but not enough. Let's try to trick some people. Do no harm, Google says, but they basically want to trick people into not recognizing that these organic results, now they're going to layer some more paid opportunities in. Sky falling? I don't think so. Should you know about it? Yes. Should you be following it? But Google also has pivots, and that's part of it, that we watch it. and we'll see what ends up happening. It makes sense. And so it's not a crazy next step, but at the same time, it's one step at a time. We look at it day to day, week to week, month to month, and continue to pivot based on what we're seeing.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me. The whole AdWords pay-per-click platform, it's been around since November of 2002. So now we're getting into its 20th anniversary. I can remember some of my first clicks that I bought were, 2 cents, 5 cents, and now we're spending hundreds of dollars for a click.
But what bothers me is like your name. To me, there should be a rule that if you're buying your own name, it should be $1. The fact that we're paying, real money for our own name,
$15 for a click on Wayne.
And then when you look at and you're branding that, I now do all my own attorneys so that when some guy, and there are two reasons: mean people that are buying your name, and secondly, it's Google, which knows that Jay Ruane is associated with connected DUI. So if somebody types that name in, they'll very often try to sell that, just like we were talking before, where they were just basically stuffing more ads, whether it be Google ads or now LSAs. When you stuff additional opportunities, when they see Jay Ruane's there, we can sell ads based on that. And unless somebody puts a negative keyword, which nobody does for Jay Ruane, meaning people who don't want to be seen as that. Right. When somebody calls me one time, somebody calls, say you're bidding on my name. I'm like, I'm not bidding on your name, but we have so much money being spent, they couldn't spend it. So they put it for this guy's name because they know it's associated with something. I put a negative keyword, it stopped. The other thing that we saw was within your profile on Google, there are lots of different bells and whistles, right? Both you and I spent a ton of time on Google Plus back in the day. That went belly up, right? We spent a ton of time. We've had posts, and those posts, for years we did them, didn't really see much from them, and eventually now they're getting indexed. We see some benefit to doing them. Right? There's like mini websites you can create within the Google environment that are interesting. We're testing them constantly. And if they really move the needle, we'll put resources into them. What I'm always looking at is not the anecdotal, because everything you do has a time value of money, right? So even as an agency, we have people paying us X amount, and you have to allocate those resources. To me, many of the people chasing the bright, shiny object and silver bullet are in fact missing, hey, if you did 10 more pages of content and 5 more high quality links, that's going to move you exponentially. All these other pieces, generally are incremental change. So to me, many of our clients are in the 3-pack and we're doing things to get them up there. Are there things that you continuously want to test? Absolutely. But this idea that if you're not doing this one thing, it's malpractice. There are opportunities. There are probably 5,000 things that we can do for clients on any given website, and you're constantly tinkering. But it's a combination of, does it really work? How much, is it that big of a deal? And how many resources do you want to put? And you're constantly balancing all of that. And there's nothing, you should be challenging yourself and trying. But once again, I feel like it's the equivalent of like a consultant that knows one more thing than you and sort of uses this to show you, oh my God, your whole process is wrong. If I told the story before, but somebody relayed this and I loved it, which is if you're number one in a market, you're crushing it. And some guy is telling you that, hey, you're missing this one factor on your GMB and you're like, Rick Harris was at a meeting, and he's one of my favorite guys out of Las Vegas. He runs this amazing practice, does more referral work than probably anybody in the country that I know of. And he was at a mastermind, and this woman was saying, you're doing this, you're not title tagging this right, and this and that. And she's really giving him a hard time. And his reaction to her is, you're right. I can't take this anymore. I'm just going to pack my bags, get on my private jet and fly home. And the idea that if somebody finds one little piece that should be done, check it out, test it. There's a good chance that Blue Shark's already testing it, but the fact that is it going to make or break your life? Absolutely not. Be careful what's being done for sales purposes versus what is going to get you actual ROI.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. I know you have people at Blue Shark that focus on the pay-per-click space. It's interesting to me that when we're at the 20-year mark, a little bit, short of it with pay-per-click, and it sounds to me and it seems to me that Google really is trying to push out all of these pay-per-click specialists to some degree with some of the things that they're doing in their recent release out of beta of the Performance Max, where you tell them what you're looking for, form fills, views, or calls, and they'll then automate a campaign for you across all of their properties, video and blogs and display network and that type of thing, which I'm curious how it's going to work with display, since they hate putting lawyers on display. You know, I'm wondering, you know, they'll take the money from lawyers for search, but they don't necessarily want banner ads of lawyers following people around.
Well, look, I got to wrap up today to deal with some stuff. But look, the sort of AI piece of Google is part of what we've talked about on prior episodes, where Google is pushing it hard. You just said, completely right. But what that also means is they're looking to they need to get enough inventory for somebody or enough test through, which is why we've started to really shy away from less than $3,000 a month pay-per-click budgets, and may at some point have to raise that, because what we're seeing is that Google, because they're forcing this so hard, if it doesn't have enough data points, that doesn't work. And so, you know, they are really doing everything they can to not allow. It used to be you and I could put 50, 500, 750 to something, and we could test it. I always told people, don't just build a website, test and see what's there with just a small budget. And that just doesn't work the way it used to. You really need to have a more substantial budget in order to get a true sense of what's possible.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest challenges for small shops now starting out, is that, you know, the spend that they're looking for is in the thousands for them to really gain traction and put you out there. And for some people, that budget just isn't available. So we're going to talk on future shows about what to do if you don't have the bigger budgets. I mean, I'm spending 15 grand plus a month on pay-per-click between, you know, all the different things that I'm spending it on. And, you know, I can remember starting and I was afraid to spend 500 a month. But it took me a while to get to this point. But folks, that's going to do it for us this week on Maximum Growth Live. As always, you can catch up with Seth and his Blue Shark or Law Firm Insider shows. Both are available on his Blue Shark YouTube page. If you want to catch up with me, please catch up with me in my Systemizing Your Law Firm for Growth Facebook group. But for us, he's Seth Price. I am Jay Ruane. Thank you so much for being with us. It's great to be back. And we'll see you next week on another edition of Maximum Growth Live. Bye for now.